Chidimma, Chi? Hi Jane, can you hear me? Jane, can you hear me? Hi, Chidima. Welcome. All right. So let's wait for a little while, so that more ladies will join. But once it's 7:15, we'll just start. All right. So it's 7:15 already. So we are just going to start. I want to confirm again if you guys can hear me. So I can just proceed. Just use the comments and just type in if you can hear me or not. All right. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about APIs and how it works, right? So APIs basically they are a bridge. So a bridge to software applications, right? So you want to communicate with one software from another software, right? You're going to use something known as an API, and the full form is known as Application Programming Interface, right? So it basically defines the methods and data formats for doing this communication, right? So if you know about HTTP, you might be thinking they are somewhat similar. Yes, they are similar to an extent, but they perform different tasks. So for HTTP, it's basically a protocol that allows you to send a request from a client. In this case, is your browser. A request can just be you searching for pictures of cats or searching for a particular domain name. And then when you place this request, it goes to a server and gets whatever you searched and then returns it back to you, right? So this is basically how HTTP works. But for an API, is a little different in the sense that it's not just um a client to server request. Is more like a communication between two softwares, right? And softwares here can be um, your your operating system in the sense where you have um, system APIs. So when you use your phone, you're searching for something in your phone, you're basically communicating with your phone, right? You're trying to get your phone settings, you're basically communicating with your phone, right? So what basically makes it possible for you to use your settings app and then use your to communicate with your OS is an API. So now you know that API is basically lays that communication between two softwares, but then HTTP just is a protocol that allows you make requests across the web. So there are types of APIs. The first one and very popular one is known as the web API. So web API basically involves you having to have an endpoint that you can query over the web and then you fetch data from across the web to your own software. So example of that is the one we're going to be using on this live call, and you're going to see how that works. And another similarity here is that the web API basically use HTTP to send this request across to the software that is trying to communicate with, right? So one of the a type of this API is known as RESTful API. So it basically uses HTTP behind the hood, and then it specifies a request method for this request to be completed. So another type of API is the library API. So subsequently, as we proceed in this workshops, we are going to be working with um, frameworks. You're going to be working with libraries like React. You're going to be working with Nest.js. You're going to be working with Vite and the likes. So, what's one thing common about this? All of this is that they have libraries, and libraries are more like code that's already been written and then put somewhere. All you just have to do is get access to these codes, these packages, and then you'll be able to use these codes in your own application. You don't necessarily have to write the code yourself. So they've already written this code. I just want you to be able to get access to this library and then you use these libraries in your own application. So, but what makes it possible for you to, from your own application that you're developing, for you to now call make a request to this AP, make a request to this package, and then you get relevant data, or for you to be able to use this package in your own application is basically APIs. because API just helps you to set the format of the data and the methods that you can call. So maybe let me say you're using um an a package that basically does plus and minus, that basically does addition, right? So depending on how this addition function was written in this package, you need to know how to query, you need to know how to call this addition function and the data you need to call this addition function with for you to be able to get your required result. And most times, if you get the data format and the method wrong, you won't get your desired result. So that's why API is there to set the methods and the data formats for you, such that whenever you get the data formats right, you'll be able to get the data you want from these packages, right? So we've talked about web APIs, we've talked about system APIs, we've talked about library APIs, and we also touched on web APIs that they use. Web API, specifically RESTful API, they use HTTP behind the hood, and HTTP has what we call request methods. So there are several request methods, but they are very popular ones like the get, the post, the put, the delete, and the patch. So basically, you're going to be using the get requests on this call today. So it's basically just like the name sounds, it just lets you get requests from somewhere. You're just getting. So the request is the data is already somewhere. So all you just have to do is to get it. So it's much is less complicated like some of these other request method. So you just put the URL address, URL that you want to get or the endpoint that you want to get this data from, and then you just make your request and you get some data to you. But then when it comes to posts, just like this sounds, post office, you're going to keep something, you're going to post something to somewhere. That means you have to have the something that you want to post. So for post request method, you have to have the data you're posting to a particular cloud server or wherever you want to put this particular data. You have to have it. So when you're making a post request, you have to have a data, and then you're going to have an endpoint where you're sending this data to. Similarly, um, your put is much similar to post. It still has to do with you putting something into a server or a database. Then the delete is very explanatory. You're deleting something from somewhere, something that you've already added to a particular database or server. You're deleting it from that place. So these are like the very popular ones. There are some that like patch, there are options and the rest, but these ones they are less common, but they are all very useful when using HTTP. So now that I've touched up on APIs, HTTP, the types of APIs, and the several HTTP request method, I'll go ahead to try and use a web API, which is an endpoint that is already available to us on the web. You just need to query it and get data. So if you just have a question, you can just drop it on the chat. I'll see it and I'll attend to it. So as I'm proceeding, if you didn't get any part of what I just explained, just do well to drop the question in the chat. So as so I'm just going to spin up my VS code so that we can write a very simple okay. I'm just going to merge the screens. Okay, so then all right, so I'm just going to have a simple HTML file so you don't make things complicated for now. As we proceed, we'll keep making things more advanced. So I'm just going to um, create a new file. I'm going to call it index.html. And I'm going to use the HTML shortcut to just generate this. And I'm just going to call this API examples. Then, so what you basically want to do, I want to make a request to a web API and then fetch dummy data. We just have a dummy data that we're just going to, it is going to look like a blog post, right? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to have a heading and I'm going to call it posts. Then I'm going to have a UL because I just want to make it an other list of posts. So I'm going to give this UL an ID of um, post data, or let me say post list, since you're working with another list. Then I'm just going to write my scripts in here. Just I don't want to write much complicated codes. So I'm just going to have a simple script here. And I'm going to have a function. And this function, I'm going to call it fetch posts. And I'm going to be using fetch API. Fetch API is basically a built-in API that requests JavaScript provides. So, well, as we are progressing, we are going to be using a request APIs like Axios, but for now, we're just going to use what we have, which is Fetch, which is a very good one too. We're just going to use the Fetch API to get this data from this our web endpoint. So I'm going to use Fetch, and Fetch basically takes the URL that we are sending this request to. So there's an open URL where you can just fetch dummy data as if you're building your application and you just want to get access to dummy data, you can use this endpoint, which is JSONPlaceholder dot typecodes.com/post, right? So now that I've specified my URL, I'm going to, and this APIs, okay, I forgot to mention that APIs are promise based in the sense that they are not synchronous, where you have to start waiting for one request to complete before you make another one. You can actually make multiple calls at the same time, and depending on the type of the call, depending on how long it takes to return, each request returns whenever it's complete. So it's more like a promise. You're sending a request and it's promising to return something to you. So that's why it's just called a promise. So you send this request. Whenever it finishes, you can send like 5, 10 requests at a time, and then they'll take different times to come back. But if you're to make it synchronous, it means that you're going to wait for a particular request to return before you proceed to the next one. And um most times that's a very bad configuration because your app will be slow and something like that. So when you send multiple requests at once and they take almost the same time to come back or slightly different times, but it won't be as much as you sending one request that takes so much time, and then all the other requests has to be batched for it to finish, for them to just be going one by one, right? So with that being said, I'm going to continue writing my fetch function. So dot then, inside this first dot then is where I'm going to write my where I'm going to receive my response, right? So I'm basically sending a request to this endpoint, and then I'm expecting a request. So I'm expecting a response. So once my request is back, I'm going to catch it in my response, right? Response, and then I'm going to define an arrow function, and I'll have to define what I want to do with this response that comes back. So first and foremost, I want to check if my response is what I was expecting. So sometimes you might send the request out and then it fails or something happens or it doesn't get you the data you want. You want to really know that this data you're sending across is um something that you're expecting. Because if you go ahead with a data that you're not expecting, you might have actually made provision for where this data will be placed, and then what is coming back is different, and then it will just cause problems, right? It will cause unexpected behaviors for your application. So it makes sense for you to check that what your response is actually what you're um expecting. So the first thing I want to check is, I want to check if my request is okay. So I'm going to use an if block. So I'm saying if my response dot okay, right? Okay, now I'm going to make it if not my response dot okay. So because I want to catch the error, right? I want to catch if it's not what I'm expecting, right? So I'm saying if my response is not okay, I want to throw an error. Throw new error. So I'll just give an error message there saying network response not okay, right? But if my response was okay, that means this my block will be totally ignored. So I want to go ahead and then return my response. So I want to return response. I want to return response.json. So if everything works fine, my response will be returned. So and I want to now do something with that response if it's actually okay. So I'm going to have another dot then function. And in this function, I'm now going to, and in this function, I'm going to catch my response and I'm going to call it posts because that's what I'm expecting. And whatever that is in my response is what's going to be in posts. And then I'm going to go ahead to specify and define what I want to do with my post. So basically what I want to do is I have an unordered list here, right? And I want to basically, for each post, I want to create a list item for each post. That means I'm going to have a loop, and then for each iteration, I'm going to create a list item and I'm going to append it inside my URL. So at the end of the day, I'm going to have um, an on a list of on other lists. So going further, I'm going to define my posts. So my posts list basically is my URL. So and that's where I want to do my appending. So I have to get that posts lists is equal to documents dot get elements by ID, and then my ID is post list, right? So then the next thing I want to do is I want to iterate through my posts. So I'm going to say posts dot for each. So post dot for each, I'm going to call a single posts, and then I'm going to, so inside for each post, this is what I want to do for each post. I want to first of all create a list item, and this item is going to be document dot create elements. It's going to be an li, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to list item. I want to add content into my list elements now. So my list item dot text content is going to be equal to, so I want to use string literal here, template literal. I'm going to say I want to get what is in my post title. Okay, so this is going to be post.title, and I'm going to have semicolon, a space, and then I'm going to have post.body. All right, so it's just going to be like a title and the description or something like that. So post.body. So this is what we have. And then the next thing I want to do, is I now want to append this my list item now into my UL, right? So I'm going to say post lists dot append child. I'm going to say append child list item. So then um now that I've defined my dem block, so I have to catch any error just in case if there's any error along the line. So I'm just going to say dot catch here. And it's just going to be, I'm going to catch it as error, and then what do I want to do with this error? I'm just going to console this error. Console.log. So maybe have a string saying error while fetching posts. Then I'm going to display my error. Okay, so now that I have defined my fetch post, then it's time to call it. So I'm going to come outside here and then say fetch posts with this. So I'm going to save. I'm going to save and I'm going to go live now. Okay. So, all right. So you can see now that we fetched a long list of data. We've been able to fetch data from a web API. We don't have this data anywhere in our local device. This data is just coming from the web. Right, so this is basically how APIs work, and it can get really complex, but this is just the basics of how API works. So you basically um, these endpoints have already defined an API for us, and we once we access this endpoint and with the right request data and with the right method and everything, we'll get what we want, right? So now that everything is right, we've been able to get this data from this endpoint. So another thing I want to show here. Okay, another thing I want to show here um is Postman. Okay, so what if I don't want to write a code to be able to just visualize how a data is? What if I just want to see what the data that is being returned from an endpoint without having to write a HTML code or even having to spin up a React application and all. So you can use tools like Postman. So Postman just helps you visualize endpoints and then help you test your APIs basically. So assuming you're writing your own API, um, you want to see what if everything is working great. So you can use Postman, and also you can also visualize what another endpoint that you're not the writer what it returns. So in our case now, I'm just going to copy this, and I want to try and see how this works in Postman. So if you don't have a Postman account, you can just go ahead and go to postman.com, create an account, and then just like the normal login process with other websites. And once you're done with that, you'll be able to have um, a view like this, right? So I'm going to make this. Okay, you will have a view like this. So from here, you can test both your own APIs and APIs from other sources. So So the first thing that I want to do now is I want to okay. So the first thing that I want to do now is okay, let me grab this like this. Okay, so I want to test out this my JSON placeholder. So I want to create a new workspace, or basically I might not necessarily create a new workspace for me to test. So I can just come here and then paste the request and then send it. So now you can see that those data also came through here. So for you, if you just want to quickly test what an API return, you just you can use Postman for that. And note that we have the request method as get. So remember when I was talking about different request method, you can see there's get, there's post, there's put, there's patch, delete, head options, right? So for us now, we are just making a um get request. We just put that here. So let me say I want to keep this endpoint for letter reference. In Postman, you can do something like that. So I can come here and then let me just close this since you're done with it. So from here, I can actually create a new collection. So now you can just come here, click on this plus icon, and then I can just create a blank collection for now, right? So, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to do, I'm going to rename it, and I want to call it Web3 Ladies Software Development Club. Software Development Club. So, and once I've done this, I can now come to this endpoint, and then when I click on save, it's going to ask me which collection I want to save it to. I'm going to choose this, and then I can actually change the name here. So I can just call this JSON. I just call this JSON placeholder posts, right? So something that you remember, right? So once you're done and you're cool with the name, you can just click on save, right? So now you've been able to use Postman to make a web request and then get the data back. And then there are several cool things you can do with Postman, but as we progress, we're going to keep exploring that. So I believe you guys are still following. So if you have any questions, you can all right. Okay. So I think that's all we have for today. And in absence of any question, I think we're going to call that a day. All right. Thank you guys for joining, and see you next time. Same time next week. Bye.